Hello, everybody. My name's Ian. Today I'm discussing working on this robot angel in the snow ink illustration. Like most of my ink illustrations, this is being done on Strathmore 100 pound, 11 by 17 inch, smooth finished Bristol board. Starting with the 2H pencil, I'm going to quickly switch over to show some of the tools that I use. Using my 2H pencil, a heavily modified now crowquill pen. I'll discuss that more in an upcoming video because in this particular video, I'm still using it unmodified, and a regular paintbrush. Um, the idea for this piece is I'm filming this in mid-January 2026, but I'd actually drawn this out in earlier in be about mid-December of 2025, and it was a response to something that the model I'm using here had said. This is a piece with my friend August. We've done quite a few pieces that have been showing on screen for the last little bit here. We've done a lot of work together. She has a very cool, kind of an elegant look that works really well with the style of robots that I like. I like illustrating. Um, she had been complaining about the cold, which is not uncommon here in Winnipeg. Currently, it is minus 30 degrees Celsius outside. It wasn't quite that cold when she was talking about it, but pretty close. Um, and just seeing that in, it was on her Instagram page, it just gave me the image of a robot standing in the snow. And sometimes it's just that's what happens. You get a quick flash of something like that, and I think I need to build an illustration around that. Um, so I had found one of the references that I've photographed of her in the past, and made this setting. The reference for the background is actually an abandoned house in southern Manitoba, in Tolstoy, Manitoba, very close to where my dad's family had their had their farm. I'd taken a pile of photos there a few years ago, and I thought basically with this piece, I was wanting to put in a lot of texture, a lot of dense um, inking texture, so that I could then create a snowfall effect in ink over top of it, and the snowfall would really jump out with that much density. Now, a lot of my pieces do have very dense, very busy backgrounds, especially with the inked work. But in this particular piece, I wanted that to be a main feature, and the main bursts of white, because I just wanted to do this as an ink piece, very much like the previous Monster Hunter piece that I did posted a video of recently. Um, the main bursts of white that I wanted to have on it would be highlights on the robot, the snow coming down, and because I was thinking of a robot angel character, I wanted to actually do a halo behind her head. So in this instance, the halo is being defined by what I'm not drawing. I'm not actually creating line art for this for the halo design. Instead, it's just basically negative space that I'm drawing around. Um, and you can see here now I'm working with the crowquill pen, with my technique of when I'm working with crowquill, dip the crowquill into water, then into the ink, then start inking with it. And that prevents that. This is how it works for me. That prevents the ink from drying to the pen itself, so it flows evenly when I'm drawing. Um, Now, that crowquill pen is very small. Like I do have very large hands, but that's still a very small pen body. So I have since modified it, as I showed in the earlier clip, to be wider and longer. At the suggest After the last video I posted talking about more about my arthritis, I had gotten suggestions about ways to modify some of my drawing tools, and that actually does seem to be working really well. Pieces I've done since this, both digitally and with traditional pencil and ink like this, seem to be working a little bit better. Um, but so now I'm putting this. Oh, I was putting in that. talking about the density, the cracked paint pattern on the wooden slats of the side of the building. Um, Now putting in very clean line art around aspects of the character where I'm going to be drawing the background. Um, with this character, even though I have a halo effect behind her head, I still want to have the background directly touching against her. Um, I don't want to put in too much white space because I want some place for the snow when I create the snowfall effect later to go. I really want to have uh, mostly dense, what would end up being gray and black. If you kind of squint your eyes, a lot of the density of the ink work would actually kind of turn gray. So I want to make sure there's plenty of room like that. There's plenty of this grayed out area that you could then drop in um, snowflakes coming down. So I don't want to have. I want to make sure that the line art for the background butts directly up against the figure. Um, There'll be a lot of things about the figure that will make her pop out, make her jump out of the frame, like to really draw the eye towards the main figure. So I won't want to do my normal slightly haloing effect of creating a thin white line or the effect of a thin white line around the exterior of the main figure or figures. So in this case, yeah, just putting in a simple outline wherever I'm about to start working on the background. So here I'm drawing along one side of her so that I can then start putting in all that detail that'll be on the door to really get that strong sense of age, of cracked paint, of this being very weathered. Like I said, this was an abandoned house. It was pretty beat up, and so I want to have the consistency. I want to have the texture of the door and the walls have the same consistency. That sort of aged look, and in particular, building up this. Uh, Even though it's a very snowy setting, and there is snow piled up in the foreground, I also want the sense that people have been kicking the bottom of that door for years, so there actually will be layers of dirt coming up from below. As dense as the line art will be over the entirety of the door, it will get denser towards the bottom. And so you can see here that I'm putting in a much stronger blacks towards the bottom of the door and then building it up lighter towards the top. Um, just to, again, give it that sense that the door isn't just falling apart due to the elements, it's been abused over the years. People have, the door has stuck, so people, when they try to go into the house to get out of the cold, they'll kick the door open along the base. Um, because of the snow, there also would have been a certain amount of snow built up on the base of that door if anybody had just opened it. So that'll be reflected in the pattern, the bottom of the door. Um, Doing more work here, outlining the figure again so that I can continue drawing around the figure. And then once I'm done outlining the figure and doing the bulk of the line art of the background surrounding the figure, that's when I'll go in and actually start doing the interior line art of the main figure. Like with all of my pieces, I much prefer leaving the central figure, leaving the subject of the storytelling to last. That method just seems to work best for me. There are times that I break with it, and I will periodically just start with the idea of build the character and then work out from that. That's usually the composition stage. So, like when I was first laying down the pencils on this, I started with the placement of the figure to make sure she was mostly in the bottom two-thirds of the illustration to give a lot of negative space above her, which will serve two purposes. It gave space for the halo behind her, but also coming from the particular comic book and commercial art background that I do, I tend to view a lot of these as though they could end up being comic book covers, things like that, where you want space in the upper third to be non-essential to the story being told. That way, you can throw a logo over that, or the title of a book, or the title of a magazine. But you still want it to be interesting. Hence, all of the icicles hanging down from the roof. Um, So now getting, working on that deep background again. Not nearly as deep backgrounds as I've done in some of the other pieces, where the background will go back, hundreds of feet. This is a very much a two plane style illustration, where essentially the two planes are the background and the character. Um, Maybe a little bit of foreground stuff with the snow, but for the most part, it's all on the equal plane. Um, I am going to be adding a little bit of depth with this window to the side of her. But again, the overall effect I want is that this house is very beaten up. It is abandoned. So there won't be too much inside the window to show the interior of the space. I mostly just want it to be reflecting the state of decay of the entire structure. Um, Almost having the icicles seem like they're merging into the building. Doing the same stippling technique on the slats of the exterior of the wall, and then with the thin brush, um, filling in blacks at the top of each one of these slats. And the reason why the overall effect I'm looking for is that the light is more or less coming from above, slightly to the side, slightly to the right hand side of frame. Um, but all the shadows on that wall are at the top of all the slats, and the idea is that those slats are bent so that each slat is sitting over top of the one below it, blocking that light. Very common design, especially around here, where you want to be having rain and snow deflecting away from the building as much as possible. Um, with the primary background completed, now we'll get into building up the detail of the ground below her. This won't be nearly as detailed because it is meant to indicate it is mostly snow covered. Now it'll be very dirty snow, so that I still have a lot of line art in there for when I do my snowfall effect. Um, but I still want it to be a little bit less busy, not quite as intense as the overall building itself. So starting with very simple shapes, outlining the overall form of the snowfall, suggestion of other footprints, and um, blades of grass that are sticking up through that snow. Um, as dense as the snowfall might be in southern Manitoba, it didn't get very high. It's very common to also see huge sections where there's grass, there's old, uh, light brown grass poking up through it. And it would certainly have that effect, this particular house in this particular spot in Manitoba. Um, so I have plenty of room and plenty of opportunity to be able to build in more texture, more detail, more of that grayness that I can then brighten with the snowfall when I start working on that. And adding in a bit a certain amount of shadow being cast from the figure onto the ground, as bright as that ground is, will still have some sense of shadow in the midst of it. Not as much as on other surfaces, um, unless if you're in any bright, if there's any overall ambient brightness in an environment like this, the shadows won't end up going that deep if it's surrounded by snow. Like the snow itself will always be reflecting light back. So I didn't want to have too much in the way of deep shadow at her feet where she's directly on the snow. Instead, the deepest shadows are inside the building where it has not been snowed on. And now that the foreground has been drawn, now I get into working on the details of the main character. Um, Typically, I'll either start directly with the face or something framing the face. So in this case, um, putting in details for the hair and now starting to draw in around the eyes, drawing in this robot pattern. This robot design that I'm putting in is a design I've been playing with for over 10 years now. Um, my the robot characters do look different from each other, but there are similar design elements. The way that The metal plates around the eyes will actually form almost a teardrop right below them, right, that you see right there. The eyebrows actually form a V pattern um, over the eye, facing going away from the eye. Things like that. I like to bring in those particular elements when I'm doing any of these robot designs. It's a little bit of a signature thing. It defines mine as being different. My designs are fundamentally different than a lot of other um, people I see doing robot designs. It's just something Uh, it's a really nice way to define the contours of a figure. So it's you're not just having too much open space unless you're wanting to fill that with painting later. If I was to do this as an inks to a traditional ink to digital color piece, but with something like this, I really wanted to get across all the storytelling as the original ink piece, and this would only ever be an inked illustration. Um, so now adding in the details on the arm, leaving in plenty of white space on the upper portion to indicate the light source coming from above and to the right of frame. Clearly not too far to the right because it's not having her hair cast a shadow onto her shoulder and arm, but still want to get that sense of most of the light's coming from above. Certainly, there will be light bouncing up from below. You're standing in a snowy environment, so you're going to get a lot of. That's actually something definitely to keep in mind if you're working on an illustration in the snow. How much light will be reflected back up onto the figure, being reflected off of the snow. So in this case, there's just looking at her right arm, most of the white space is on the upper portion, but there's still a decent amount of white space on the lower portion to indicate that that it's reflecting light from below. That, and given that she's metallic, she's also just reflecting her environment. Doing a quick design all the way through. So I did my basic uh, metal plate robot pattern over the entire figure, and now starting to paint in some deeper shadows, including one on the face to help define the shape of her hair. Um, and I'll be doing a lot more of that with the wings, as much as the wings are the same material that she is and just as reflective. The way that they're aimed, and especially the exterior of the two wings pointing towards each other, will end up creating more shadows. So a very deep shadow on her right wing, because that all the light on that would normally be cast on that right wing is being blocked by the left wing, and then some deeper shadows onto the legs, specifically to push her right leg further back in space. There won't be quite as much black ink on her left leg because that'll be further forward. It'll be interacting with the light from below and the light being reflected around in the environment. But I definitely wanted to have some heavy blacks on the main character because of the snowfall effect that I want to do. And it is tricky with this one that I want to do a snowfall effect while also having this halo effect around her head. Um, I can't have the snow interact with the halo too much because then it'll just become a little too blurry. But it feels like here I've got enough. Um, I have enough detail in the background behind her, behind the haloing, that the halo stands out. I have enough detail on the main character that when I start putting in snowfall effect, it will show up. It will look like there's snow falling, but there's also enough contrast in the main character to make her stand out from the background. The eye is still being drawn towards her as a combination of the heavy blacks and, frankly, the halo around her head. It'll definitely draw the viewer's attention. Here, I'm using my Dr. P.H. Martin's white ink with a paintbrush to drop in my snow pattern. The whole point of this illustration was this particular effect, where I just want to drop in Snow falling over the whole piece. Um, it'll be interacting with absolutely everything that you see. There's nothing in front of the snow from the viewer's perspective. So everything in this illustration will be affected by the snow falling. Making sure to vary the size of the snow, make it very heavy. This is this definitely feels like a heavier, wetter December snow here in Manitoba. Um, we're now getting at the time of year where it's going to start getting a lot drier. It's going to get a lot finer. You wouldn't have this necessarily same effect. Um, but now all that detail I was doing in the background and all the heavy blacks around there are really starting to pay off because it gives me plenty of room to put in the snowfall and have it really show up while still being separate from the halo around her. Um, it's not causing the halo to end up being too fuzzy. Um, with the snowfall, honestly, my biggest concern is just to make sure I don't end up obscuring her facial features at too much. A little bit here and there would be fine, just to indicate the snow falling. And here we have the finished piece. Thanks very much for hanging out and watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.